Now, for those of you that don't know, 2 years ago, this whole pandemic thing started. You may or may not have heard about it. And at some point, they developed a vaccine, which is a thing that stops you from getting this disease that's going around. And for reasons, there has been vaccine hesitancy, or outright denial, where people just don't want to get a shot that makes you not get sick. And it may sound silly to some of you that you wouldn't want to prevent a disease, but I'm going to go through some of the reasons why people feel this way and try to address them. Now, first is that the vaccine is made by furries. Now, obviously, that's ridiculous. No one is worried that the vaccine is made by a furry and therefore not something they should get. But actually, it's true. It was made by a furry, and I just wanted to start with something light to, break up the video because I'm sure it's going to upset people later. But there is, in fact, a woman in her 30s that is a scientist who helped develop the Moderna vaccine and also happens to be an active member of the furry community. She goes by the online pseudonym Chise, C-H-I-S-E, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but there's a picture on the screen so you can see what her avatar looks like. And really none of that has any bearing on her ability to do her job as a scientist. It's just a sign that she has a really expensive hobby, something I can very strongly relate to. Not because I'm also a furry, but because I also have a very expensive hobby. Also, I will point out that it makes this meme a whole lot funnier. The vaccine contains microchips. Okay, so this is where the real conversation starts. First, I will start by saying that although I did search and look and read way too many articles about this, I cannot find a singular source for this rumor. The two that I seem to find most often were a radio host that was quoted in October of 2020, early October, around the time that Donald Trump himself was diagnosed with COVID. He started spreading the rumor that lots and lots of people would get vaccinated and then boom, they'd have microchips inside them. And another source of this rumor that seemed to pop up a lot was a certain televangelist. But none of those were definitive or could say for sure this is where the rumor came from. Also, I will point out that radio DJ host and televangelist, neither of those jobs are credible sources for scientific information. Just wanted to throw that out there. But either way, regardless of the source, let me address the issue in the rumor itself, that vaccines have microchips in them. Now, the first way to easily counteract this argument is to just point out the fact that we don't have microchips. Since the beginning of the lockdown practices and the border closures and just all the various COVID protocols, there's been a worldwide shortage in a lot of electronic components, including microchips. Any of you that have tried to buy a PS5 or a new car or any number of things really has most likely discovered this on your own. So that being said, we've administered over 420 million doses of the vaccine just in the US. So if each one were to contain a microchip that we were then embedding in people, we would need over 420 million microchips, and the numbers just aren't there. We don't have them. But even if we did have them, just for the sake of devil's advocate, what exactly would happen next? Well, the consensus of the people that follow this rumor theory seems to be that either they would use these microchips to kill off the population, to control the population, or to track the population. Now, the first one is probably the easiest to refute. If they wanted to kill everyone off, A, there are easier ways to do it, but B, they wouldn't want that. That would make no sense. See, the government, which is the bad guy in all of these theories, they need us. We pay taxes, and that's where their money comes from. And whether you like it or not, unfortunately, the USA is more of a capitalist corporation than it is a democratic country. That is to say, money kind of rules everything. And without money, the government can't do much. They certainly can't keep spending on the military. And they like doing that. So if we take away all the taxpayers, over 200 million people have been vaccinated. If you kill off 200 million people, that's a lot less tax money. That doesn't help the government. they're not going to do that to themselves. So let's go to the next option, and that would be control. Well, this is another one that is actually pretty easy to refute. The closest thing we have to the human mind being controlled involving computers or microchips is Neuralink, a company created by Elon Musk, who is actually a South African and not an American. I think he is now, but he wasn't initially. His allegiances probably don't lie here. His companies just happen to. But the Neuralink is an interface that you actually hook up to your brain, I believe somewhere in the brain stem, and it allows a person to control a user interface on a computer via brainwaves. Basically, you can tell a cursor to move or a button to click. There are a couple problems here, though. One, it doesn't communicate both ways. You tell the computer what to do, but it doesn't then in turn tell your brain to move an arm or a leg. Your brain has to send the signals to do that. And second, is actually to continue off that point, the reason it's not a two-way communication is because it's just not that powerful. Nothing is. Personal computers, for example, have generally up to or around 4 terabytes of processing power. Terabyte is, or teraflop, or whatever thing they use. Tera, in this instance, is 1,000 gigabytes, which is 1,000 megabytes, which is 1,000 kilobytes, which is 1,000 bytes. So it seems like a big number. However, the human brain has 1 exaflop of processing power, and I can't even begin to break down how inconceivable that number is. But it's millions times, and I mean that quite literally, millions times greater than what a computer would do. And maybe you're thinking, well, maybe not a personal computer, but what about a supercomputer? Surely that could control the human brain. And again, no. The strongest supercomputer we have, the most powerful, the most advanced one we have in existence, only has 55 petaflops of power, which again is a very large conceivable number, but it's still nowhere near the 1 exaflop that the brain does. And again, I can't really break out these numbers in a way that will make them make sense, because the sheer scope of them is just ridiculous. But I am going to link the source of this and everything I mentioned in this video in the description below, because I did research this. I'm not talking out my butt here. But yeah, just to summarize, the brain is the most powerful computer ever. The human brain can do just leaps and bounds beyond what any bit of technology could ever even kind of hope to achieve. So, yeah, and that's using a supercomputer, the strongest, most powerful supercomputer in the world, one that takes up the size of a whole building. So the thought that a microchip small enough to be transmitted through the needle of a syringe, that could never produce that power, ever. Not even in sci-fi is it that strong. It's literally impossible. And that brings us to the last point, tracking. What if these microchips will be used for tracking? To which I say, why? I mean, really, why would the government want to do that? Because if you're not aware, what everyone in the world has is one of these. This is a cell phone. Inside this is a GPS chip that is being tracked all the time. Your location is just being beamed out at all times by your phone. It's being geotagged in every picture you take. It's being uploaded as metadata alongside every post you make on social media. And in addition to your location, this has cameras and microphones that can be remotely enabled if someone were to break into your phone. So a hacker or a government agency could easily not only get your location, but the audio and video of everything happening around you. In addition to that, your search history through Google, your browser history, your shopping habits on sites like Amazon or eBay, all the bills that you paid online, your banking, which you trust the internet to take care of for you. All of these things that you've done online are all obtainable by the government. Any information they want about you, they can easily get without putting a microchip in your body. In fact, not too long ago, half of the country, myself included, had their social security number leaked online by Equifax, a company that's supposed to keep us safe and track our information. So everyone's information is out there at all times to anyone that wants it. You already don't have any privacy at all. But if you did, the government could already get around it without putting a chip inside you, is my point. And also, to what end would they want you tracked? Like, what information is it that people believe the government would want from them? Because you have to remember, this is not just the US government. This is all of the governments. These vaccines were created through cooperation through labs all around the world. And the 3 that we eventually got were each owned and created and put out by a different lab in a different country. So all the funding, all the research, all the cooperation, this is every country in the world. So not only would you theoretically be tracked by the US, but also Russia, China, Yugoslavia, Indonesia, and every other country that exists. So how would it benefit every country with different opposing viewpoints and goals and ideals to track the individuals of every other country and their own? It doesn't make logical sense if you ask the question why. So for that reason alone, plus all the ones I mentioned, this is just an impossible and nonsensical reason to not get a vaccine. Vaccines are used to control us. Now this is not the literal meaning of control, like I covered in the last example, but rather the figurative meaning. The government is going to basically change who we are as a people and control us in a way that we don't want to be controlled. And again, I ask, why? To what end? What do they gain by having us all vaccinated? What is it that the sheer act of us getting vaccinated is changed inside of us that benefits the government? Because to control us, to use this as a form of control, not only does it have to let them change something about us, but it changes something about us in a way that benefits them and is a detriment to us. And in this instance, there is no detriment. We're becoming healthier unless people are dying. And the only benefit to the government is that we continue being alive and continue paying taxes. So there's no real argument here because it's only a half-formed theory. There's a very broad, vague statement of we're being controlled, but no one goes far enough to explain who we're being controlled by or what we're being controlled to do. And if you can't even flesh out your thought, it's not worth a whole lot for me to try to refute it. Well, it's not my problem if other people get sick. First of all, this is an awful way to live your life. It should absolutely be your problem if other people are sick or injured or dying. Why wouldn't you want your fellow human to be alive? Like, you have to be an awful human being to not care about the other human beings around you. For example, I have neighbors, like most people that lives in houses. And if my neighbor, right now, were to be on fire, and I had a bucket of water, but then exclaimed out loud, "I don't care if he burns to death," that would make me an awful human. But if you replace fire with disease, and bucket of water with immune system, then suddenly people think that's okay, but it's really not. It's a terrible argument to make. You should always help the people around you if and when you can, especially if it's of no detriment to yourself. But even, let's ignore that and say that you're right, and it's not your problem if other people are sick. You're wrong, you're still an awful person, but let's pretend you're not an awful person, and let's pretend that that's your argument. You're still incorrect, because it's absolutely a problem. See,
we live in a society.
And because of that, the people around you, your neighbors, and your friends, coworkers, peers, social circle, all these people do things for you, even indirectly, even if you don't know it. For example, the people that deliver your mail, the people that serve you your coffee at Starbucks, the people that fix your car, the line workers that keep the electricity going in your neighborhood, nurses, teachers, all these people are people that live in your neighborhood and around you and interact with you and the people around you. They all matter to you. You might not think they do because you don't know their name, or they're just an abstract person and not necessarily a physical person that you see and know, but they still exist and you still very much need them. If they stopped existing and you could no longer get your mail or your morning coffee, and kids in your neighborhood were no longer going to school and were instead being left to their own imaginations and not being kept off the streets, that would be a problem for you. I'm sure that would be a problem for most people. And that is why it does very much matter to you if the people around you are sick. Well, I already have an immune system. Yes, you do. And even with that immune system, there are plenty of other diseases you need to be vaccinated against, or they kill you. SARS, measles, hepatitis, tetanus, and polio are all diseases that you need to be vaccinated against as an infant, or you can die. They can all do very bad things to you, up to and including killing you. So your immune system is not absolute. It is not Clark Kent of the cellular structures. It's not a magic spell protecting you from all diseases. It's something that needs to be built up and worked on over time. And even then, it's still absolutely fallible. People still get diseases. For example, you may have heard of cancer. People get it all the time. Even children, even healthy people. Everybody can get it. So your immune system, it doesn't matter as much as you think. But let's say you take this approach and you get the disease, maybe accidentally, or maybe by going through, and I can't believe these are things that exist, COVID parties where people purposefully infect each other. I'm going to not address that right now. And let's say you get this disease and now you hope to build your own immune system. And that's great. I hope you do. However, even if you come out the other side of the disease and you're not one of the people that die, because, I mean, a lot of people do, then there have been some long-lasting side effects of this disease. Now, I don't have specific numbers because I was not able to find them, and I do not want to make up statistics or facts. I did find, from the Mayo Clinic, a list of things that have been reported and verified as side effects from COVID-19. And this list includes long-term and permanent organ damage to not only the lungs, because it is, of course, a respiratory disease, but also the heart, kidney, and brain, which you may or may not know, those are important organs. Also, you could have a higher risk for strokes and blood clots, and also an issue with just blood cells and tissues. Also, it increases things like depression and anxiety, and even chronic fatigue. So you just won't have the energy to live your life. And again, the biggest long-term effect of COVID-19 has, of course, been death in nearly 800,000 people. That's a lot of people that are not people anymore. They're now just rotting pieces of meat in the ground. So you could build your immune system that way, but it doesn't sound like it's gonna go great for you if you do. Well, we shouldn't be forced to do anything with our bodies that we don't want to. I kind of agree with that standpoint. For example, people should not be forced to bring babies to term inside their body if they don't want to. I definitely agree there. People should not be forced into genital mutilation when they're infants and can't make that decision for themselves. I definitely agree with that too. But as far as getting shots that protect not only yourself but the people around you, yeah, you really should be forced into that. Because for the reasons I mentioned earlier, you need the people in your neighborhood to be alive, so you should protect them. And if you're not going to do it willingly, you should be forced to. But let's take a look at the word forced, because really, no one is forcing you to do anything. You may lose your job if you don't get vaccinated. You may lose your house if you don't get vaccinated. You might be denied entrance to various schools. You may be ostracized. If you hold public office, you'll almost certainly lose that position. Yes, all of those things are true. However, you're not being forced to. You're given a choice. And with the choice that you made, there are repercussions, there are consequences, and you are facing those because you chose to. So it's not force, it's a choice. You just want to make the choice without having any consequences whatsoever. And that's not what freedom means. That's not how the system works, that's not how it's ever worked, and that's not how it should work. So I just wanted to clarify that. You're not actually being forced. You're given a choice. You just don't like what your choice means for you. You want your choice to not have consequences. But back to this forced idea. The government forces people to get vaccines all the time. If you've ever attended a public school or a college, if you've ever tried to hold a government job or even a contract job for the government, if you've ever tried to join the military, all of these things require you to get vaccinated. That's the choice that they make, is everyone that does these things needs to be vaccinated. That's been the case for a long time, for all the vaccines prior to COVID, and it now includes this vaccine as well. So there's a precedent here. It's not unusual that they're forcing people to do this. It's kind of the status quo. And really, it's for the better. The government doesn't want people acting like figurative plague rats, and we shouldn't either. Well, the vaccine was rushed and developed way too fast. No, it was not rushed, it was expedited. Those may sound similar, but what you're implying with the words is the issue. But to go back a little bit, mRNA research began back in the 60s. So we have nearly 60 years of information at our fingertips in regards to mRNA vaccines and how that can be a delivery method. Likewise, our knowledge of coronaviruses like SARS or the flu has existed for about as long. And those kinds of viruses have existed for even longer. So we had a lot of knowledge to pull from going into this. This wasn't new. This wasn't something we had to discover. We just had to tweak what we already knew to apply it to this specific scenario. And not only that, but while all of the regular testing was absolutely still done for this vaccine, the way it was done was expedited. For example, a lot of times there would be bureaucratic red tape and waiting periods and various sign-offs that would have to go and change hands or go from lab to lab or different peer reviews. Lots of basically paperwork that could hold things up. Whereas because we were in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, all of that was expedited. Governments were just signing things to move them along the process. The work was still done. It was just done in a way that it didn't need to wait. Likewise, for example, some of the testing that would usually happen consecutively. So they would run test A, and then when test A was finished, they would run test B. And then when test B was finished, they would run test C. Well, here, because of the urgency of the world and the need to get this vaccine, they were able to do tests A, B, and C all at the same time. So whenever the last one finished, the other two had already finished, and as long as the results of all three tests were good, then it would move along. So that cut the development time, at least in that stage of it, down to a third. And really, when you have all the world pooling its resources and giving you the top priority, so you basically have a blank check with none of your researchers being pulled away and no one to hold you back, you can accomplish anything. I mean, let's not forget, people went to the moon in less than 100 years after we discovered flight. People can do amazing things when given free rein, and this is just an example of that. And actually, to further prove that things were tested and done correctly, the FDA did approve earlier this year in August the vaccine for use. So we know it works, we know it's safe, and it was developed the way it was supposed to. So this argument just doesn't hold water. Well, what about all the side effects? Well, there have been some reported. And, as with most mRNA vaccines, when there is a side effect, it usually occurs within a couple weeks. So for the people worrying about the long-term side effects, we've been using mRNA vaccines for a while now. This is not at all the first, nor will it be the last. In fact, just recently, within the last week, both a Lyme disease and an HIV mRNA vaccine has been announced to be in development. So people are using this technology all the time, not just for COVID-19. But we know from all those other vaccines that long-term side effects just really don't happen. If there are any, we see them in the first few weeks, if not the first few days. And, like I said, with the COVID-19 vaccine, there have been some reported. So far, effects that have been reported by the CDC, I'm not going off of the VAERS reporting here, because if you're unfamiliar, VAERS is a self-reporting, non-reviewed or authenticated source. Basically, anyone can put a claim in there or report their case without it being peer-reviewed or validated. So those numbers are not necessarily trustworthy, and they are not actually indicative of a problem. So I am using ones that have been reviewed and qualified and validated by the CDC. And I'm going to look off my phone and make sure I get the numbers and the instances correct here. One of the side effects that they have reported would be anaphylaxis, which is basically an allergic reaction. And they're saying that that happens in anywhere from 2 to 5 out of every million people. There's thrombosis, which has happened 54 times out of 16 million. There's the, and I may not be pronouncing this correctly, the Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS, which has happened in 268 of 16 million people. And that appears to mostly affect only men over 50. There's myocarditis, which has happened in 1,071 people to date of the 200 million that have been vaccinated. And then there is a clotting condition that has actually led to 6 deaths. That's 5, not 6. 6 deaths. But that clotting condition, as well as the thrombosis and GBS that I mentioned, appear to only happen with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and they do actually have qualifiers. The thromboses were mostly women under 50. The GBS, like I mentioned, was in men over 50. And then the clotting condition was also related to women who had a propensity for clotting and were in a specific age range, although I don't remember that range offhand. However, even then, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been administered to 16 million people, and 6 have died. COVID has killed nearly 800,000 people just in the US. So you may know this already, but 800,000 is larger than 6 by just a margin. And to do the math, and I did, 800,000 people is how many died from getting COVID. 50 million people have been reported to have gotten COVID. So that's a 0.016% chance of dying from COVID. Now that may seem low, but your odds of getting a troublesome side effect from the vaccine, not dying, just getting any of these long-term side effects, so anything that lasts longer than a couple days and will negatively impact you, is 0.003051%. That's 524 times less likely than dying of COVID. And again, I'm not even comparing deaths, because that would be 6, which would be a much, much smaller percentage. I'm comparing any long-term negative side effect at all just to dying of COVID, and you're still 524 times less likely. So, by comparison, getting the vaccine is super duper safe, and the chances of getting a long-term side effect is next to nothing. I don't trust the ingredients of the vaccines. See, now this one, I can kind of understand. Putting chemicals in your body that may alter it in ways that you don't know is scary. In fact, hold on, I need to make sure I'm getting these words right, and I'm probably still going to pronounce them wrong, but hydroxycinnamic acid, cyanidins, I don't know, flavanols, calcones, I'm probably not pronouncing these right, anthrocyanides, or cyanines, I don't know. I probably got most of those wrong. But I don't really know that I want those in my body either. If I can't even pronounce them, do I really want them inside me? The problem here is that I've been misleading you. Those are some of the chemicals that make up an apple. So the argument that you don't want to put something inside you if you don't know what it is kind of asinine. You didn't know that those chemicals made up an apple. You also don't know what those chemicals are, or what they do, or how they react to your body. In fact, you don't even know that they are the chemical makeup of an apple. They are. It's linked in the description. I have sources for everything I've said so far. But my point is, you don't know what the ingredients are to anything that you consume. What are the chemicals that make up a banana or chocolate? What are the pasteurization and homogenization processes that happen to cheese and eggs that you would get from the dairy at the store? Why is it that store-bought eggs can't stay out at room temperature, but fresh eggs can? What's happening to those eggs? What's in an Advil or a Tums? And if you smoke cigarettes especially, you have no argument at all. You shouldn't even be speaking on this topic because you're knowingly consuming numerous known poisons, literal, actual poisons. So this argument doesn't work because no one knows what they're putting in their body pretty much at any given time. So yeah, I'm sorry, but this doesn't work. Vaccines cause autism. See, now this, in 1998, I've gone over this before with people. In 1998, a small study was done that claimed to show a link between vaccine administration in children and autism. However, when this study then got to the peer review stage and was actually inspected by real, proper scientists, they found that not only did the data not 100% correlate this link, but the data itself was actually falsified. And actually, the scientist that did this study had his medical license removed. It was stripped from him because he was not fit, and he lied to falsify numbers in a study to prove a point that he came to ahead of time. Later, multiple studies were done by actual reputable scientists and then peer-reviewed and fact-checked, and those all found that there was no link at all between autism and vaccine administration. And also, I would like to point out, and I won't go into great length here because actually Penn and Teller, of all people, have done a much better job explaining this point, but autism means that your child is alive. Not getting a vaccine for potentially fatal diseases means that they might not be. So between the two, alive and autistic or dead, I think I'd take the alive kid every time. I know people who are on the autistic spectrum. They're still pleasant to talk to. I can still hang out with them. I can't say the same for dead folks. Once you're dead, you're kind of a killjoy. Well, I'm not going to get it because I'm not a sheep.
One of us, we accept her, one of us. Gooba gobble, gooba gobble. We accept her, Gooba gobble, gooba gobble. One of us, one of us.
Well, personal anecdote here. I chose to get this vaccine because, partly because I know someone in my life who has a very compromised immune system. They have multiple forms of cancer and just a lot of other issues that means they can't get diseases or they die. Their body won't fight them off. If they get a disease, they'll just die. So I didn't want that to happen. But aside from that, I, like I mentioned before, don't want to put chemicals in my body that I don't know. Even though I don't know what a lot of things in my body are, or what new things introduced to my body will do, I'm still always a little hesitant of doing strange things to my body. It's why I don't drink, smoke, or do drugs. So, I went online to the CDC, the FDA, and various other sites to actually to read into what the vaccines did and how it would affect me. I wanted to know what my chance was of getting a negative side effect. I wanted to know where this was being administered, into how many people it had already been administered, what side effects they had experienced, who signed off on this, what kind of testing was done. And so I read all the papers, I read all the research, I read what all these scientists and doctors and medical professionals and chemists had all said, and I believed them. Because I like to think of myself as a smart person, but I'm a computer programmer. If you need help with SQL code, or HTML, or JavaScript, I got your back. I can help. I don't know what chemicals react to what other chemicals in the body. I don't know what the proper dosage of any given medicine is. I am not an expert, nor will I ever be an expert, in medicine. So my opinion of medicine does not matter. Medical professionals who study medicine, they're the ones that I'm going to listen to. So when I read all the research and the studies and the papers that they had put out, and they all unanimously, from reputable sources, they all said that people should vaccinate. So I did. However, the people making these sheep arguments, they're not doing any of that. They are watching Fox News and watching Donald Trump, which not a great idea, and then they're listening to their pastor at church on Sunday in a group with no masks. Also not a great idea. And they're listening to these people tell them, don't get vaccinated. And so they don't. You see, they're not doing any research. They're not even thinking. They're being told what to do by loud people, and they're listening to those loud people. So, if I were to ask you to spot the sheep-like behavior in those two examples, I think you'd have to agree that it's that second set that I mentioned. The ones that are actually not doing any free thinking and are instead just blindly listening to what people tell them. Ironically enough, one of those people used to be the head of the government, and that's the person telling them to blindly follow orders, and they're doing it. So this big government that's controlling people is controlling those people, and they might just be the sheep. But those are my thoughts. And by thoughts, I mean those are actual facts with sources in the description. They're not thoughts. So we're not going to agree to disagree, because these are not opinions. These are facts. You don't agree or disagree with facts. Facts exist, and you either acknowledge them or you're stupid. But also, this is just the way it is. Get vaccinated. Wear a mask. Save other people's lives. Or if you're absolutely, utterly selfish, save your own life. Even if you think I'm wrong and everything I've said is wrong and you don't know how to read, so you won't fact check the sources I've cited below, get the vaccine, wear a mask, stay alive long enough to maybe prove me wrong. Or don't, because at the end of the day, I don't want people to die, but I'm also not your mom. I can't control what you do. And if you do end up killing yourself off, that's one less plague rat in the world for the rest of us to worry about.